asked you, can you think of good and bad examples of corporations in terms of this three-box balance? Here is a list. If you think about retailing industry, you can think of Sears versus Walmart. Actually, Sears created the retailing industry at the turn of the 20th century. Because if you think of the price points, there is high price, premium product, middle price, middle class products, and low price, low quality products. So in terms of quality, high price, medium quality, medium price, low quality, low price. And Sears established the retailing industry by catering to the middle class in the US, by offering mid-quality, mid-price segment. What Walmart did was to offer branded products at a lower cost. Therefore, they created a whole new segment, medium quality at low price. Thereby, they drove Sears out of business. Or think about Kodak versus Facebook. Kodak actually invented the photography business, but their business model was based on analog cameras, 3-inch yellow box, which was a powerful business model. Yet when Facebook came, Instagram, this is a complete box 3 game changer. Or think about Xerox and Canon in the photocopying industry. Again, Xerox created the photocopying industry so much so that people don't call it copy this sheet of paper. They say Xerox this sheet of paper by creating the $200,000 big copier. What Canon did was a box 3 move where they made a $1,000 copier, a desktop copier for every human being. Or think about airline industry, the full line air carrier like Pan Am versus what Southwest Airlines did, a box 3 move, which is ultra low cost air travel. Or finally, you take a look at the contrasting strategies between Blockbuster and Netflix. And Blockbuster, once upon a time, was such a successful company, and nobody has heard about them since. And Netflix completely changed the rules of the game through sending the DVDs and finally actually streaming the content right to your home. Let's take a look at emerging markets. India and China. Every report that I read indicates India and China will grow very aggressively in the next decade. Therefore, strategy for any organization is to ask the question, how do I participate in that growth? Here is the catch. The catch is growth in emerging markets cannot be captured through box 1 approach. If you're an American company, you can't take business models that you created for middle America, the mass market in America, in box 1, and simply send those business models to India or China and hope to capture the mass market in India or China. Why? Because the mass market in emerging economies is fundamentally different than the mass market in the US. The most simple way I can highlight the difference is by taking per capita income. Per capita income in India is $1,500. Per capita income in the US is $50,000. What that tells me is no business model that you created for middle America in box 1, where the mass market per capita income is $50,000, you can simply go and take it into India and hope to capture middle India, where the mass market per capita income is $1,500. You have to engage in box 3 innovation if you want to unlock the potential in emerging economies. Here is a company which did not do a good job. I'm talking about Ford Motor Corporation. By the way, when India opened up in the early 90s, one of the very first automobile companies which entered India was Ford Motor Corporation. And when they entered India, they knew there was a market for automobiles in India. They also knew that Indian consumer cannot afford to buy an ultra-luxury passenger car. Therefore, what they did was they took one of their low-end models, targeted at Middle America, priced in the US for about $20,000. So they took one of their Box 1 business models created for Middle America, and then they tried to send that platform into India. And before they sent that automobile platform into India, they wanted to adapt it for Indian conditions. And one of the ways they tried to adapt it for Indian conditions is to take out unnecessary cost from that automobile platform. If you can take unnecessary cost out, you can bring down the price point. That's always good. So they put together a design team in Detroit to figure out what's good for India. And one of the places the design team decided to take cost out was in the power windows. Instead of having power windows on all the 4 doors, the design team said, well, Indians could do it with power windows on just the front 2 doors. That decision, did it bring down the cost structure in that automobile platform? Sure. Therefore, they could price it less. Now, what happened in India? Someone in India who can afford to buy, say, a $15,000 automobile is typically extremely rich. That Indian tends to have a chauffeur. So the chauffeur got the power window. I'm not making this up. This looked like a perfectly logical way to enter India when you are wearing the Detroit lens. By the way, this is not the bad part of the story. The really bad part of the story is even if Ford intelligently adapted the business model for Indian conditions, they didn't do it intelligently, but even if they did it intelligently, at best they can capture 10% of the Indian population. That's all that can afford business models created for mass market in the US, adapted for conditions in India. Markets like India and China are big because there are lots of people. If you try to concentrate on the top 10% of the economic pyramid, then you are missing the opportunity. The bulk of the opportunity is in the remaining 90%. 90% of India are non-consumers of automobiles. The challenge is, how do you convert them into consumers of automobiles? 90% of Indians, bulk of them, go in two-wheelers. Two-wheelers today are priced about $4,000. If you can make an automobile for $5,000, you can migrate the two-wheeler population into four-wheeler population. That requires box 3 thinking. The company from South Korea, Hyundai, pioneered a $6,000 automobile in India and cracked open a whole new market by converting people who drive two-wheelers into four-wheelers. And one of the things Hyundai did as compared to Ford is they moved their design center into India. They're one of the largest research and development for automotive in India. So much so that has become the global center of excellence for launching low-cost value automobiles all over the world. Here is a better example. This is about General Electric and in their healthcare division. GE, in their healthcare business unit, what they do is they make medical imaging equipment. This would be X-ray machines, CAT scanners, MR machines, electrocardiogram machines. What you're seeing here is an electrocardiogram machine. The ECG machine is the first point of diagnosis for heart attack. This particular machine was innovated by GE. This is an extremely powerful machine. This has saved lives. This has saved millions of American lives. This ECG machine will cost about $20,000. I want you to imagine how a US hospital operates. If you walk into a US hospital, what you're likely to find is a very sophisticated imaging center. There you're going to find a $1 million X-ray machine, $2 million CAT scanner, $3 million MR machine, and this $20,000 ECG machine. And when the doctor asks the patient to go to the imaging center, the patient goes there. This is how a US hospital operates. I want you to shift the scene for a moment to India. Certainly GE sells this $20,000 ECG machine in India to the top 10% of the economic pyramid. After all, there are going to be rich folks in poor countries, just like the way you have poor folks in rich countries. It may be a thin slice, but it exists. By the way, this is the top 10% of the economic pyramid Ford targeted. These are already consumers of products that we consume in the West. But then the question is, what about the remaining 90% of Indians? Remaining 90% of Indians are non-consumers of this $20,000 ECG machine. Just like the way 90% of Indians are non-consumers of automobiles for the Ford example that I described. Why are 90% of Indians non-consumers of this $20,000 ECG machine? The first and the most obvious reason is affordability. You see, on this $20,000 ECG machine, a single ECG scan will cost $200. 90% of Indians, bulk of them live in rural areas. In rural India, you are making $2 a day or even less. You can do the mental math. But affordability is not the only problem. Suppose you found a rural area where everyone is willing to pay the $200 per scan. There is yet another problem. And that is, in rural India, there are no hospitals. That means you can't ask the patient to go to the hospital. The hospital has to come to the patient. That means somebody has got to take this $20,000 machine door to door. This machine weighs 500 pounds. If a machine weighs 500 pounds, I can't put it in my backpack and take it door to door. Suppose you manage to take this machine in a bus to a rural area where, let's say, everyone is willing to pay the $200. There is yet another problem. And that is, this $20,000 ECG machine works only on house current. As you probably know, in rural India, electricity is either unavailable or unreliable. That means even if you manage to take it there, this machine can't be operated. Suppose, let's assume you found a village where everyone was willing to pay the $200, and you managed to take this machine in a bus. And let's also assume there is 100% assured electricity. There is yet another problem. And that is, this $20,000 ECG machine is extraordinarily powerful. It can be operated only by trained doctors. In fact, it typically comes with a 500-page user's manual. Well, in rural India, there are no trained doctors. That means for 90% of Indians, this $20,000 ECG machine is non-consumption. That doesn't mean 90% of Indians don't suffer from heart attack. In fact, this is one of the main points that I want to leave with you. Non-consumers have exactly the same problem as consumers. They are non-consumers because they can't consume the product consumers are consuming. If you can create box-free innovation, breakthrough innovation, non-linear innovation, then you can unlock this value. You can convert these non-consumers into consumers. In 2008, GE innovated this $500 ECG machine. On this $500 ECG machine, a single ECG scan will cost 10 cents. If a single ECG scan costs 10 cents, even if I'm making $2 a day, I am willing to allocate 10 cents for a scan if I get severe chest pain. In fact, my rule of thumb is if you want to convert non-consumers into consumers in urban India, you better come up with a 10% solution. If you want to convert non-consumers into consumers in rural India, you better come up with a 1% solution. That means if a product costs $100 in the US, it better cost $10 in urban India. It better cost $1 in rural India. Besides being affordable, this $500 ECG machine is extremely lightweight. In fact, it weighs less than a can of Coca-Cola. If something weighs less than a can of Coca-Cola, I can put it in my backpack and take it door to door. Not only that, this $500 ECG machine operates on battery. On a single battery charge, it can produce 750 ECG scans. Finally, this $500 ECG machine is extremely simple to use. In fact, it only has got two buttons. There is a green button and then there is a red button. If you push the green button, it works. If you push the red button, it stops. As long as you know how to read traffic signs, you should be able to operate this machine. GE has opened up a whole new market in 90% of India with this $500 ECG machine. Box 3 innovation is how you can convert non-consumers into consumers. And if you want to create Box 3 innovation, the starting point for you is to understand what are the nonlinear shifts, what are the weak signals in my environment. What I want you to do is take a look at the last 2 decades and think about what are the big nonlinear shifts that have fundamentally transformed, say, your industry.